Hi everybody, I'm Jack the Rambling Raconteur, and I hope that you're doing well. I hope you're having a great week. We're on fall break, so I'm getting some extra reading in. And I'd like to discuss Die, My Love by Ariana Harwicz, which is utterly compelling. I read it in fewer than 24 hours. I just couldn't stay away from the narrator's voice, as horrifying as it is. This is a horror novel. It's literary fiction, but it's psychological horror of the highest order, as Harwicz presents us with an unnamed narrator who is a new mother. And in the book, we encounter her realization that this new phase of her life, being a mother, is not only not this playful wonderland that she had, sort of been led to believe it would be. It is overwhelming, and it is in many respects a waking nightmare for most of her day. She feels overwhelmed, she does not feel supported, and we encounter all of her emotions in a very authentic, in my reading, authentic voice. We see her fear around something bad happening to her child. Initially a toddler, a baby, and then later on a toddler. We see her fear around what's happening to her, the violence that she feels, and the emotion that she feels, and the recognition of what's happening. Her fears as she feels like her own life and mind changing. We see fear around, and anger around the lack of support from her partner and later husband. We see the question around why is he late for work, coming home from work? Is it because he's having an affair? And so we see all that, but we also see, and I think this was a really critical aspect to the book, we see that there are desires this narrator has that are outside of this role of the mother, that she has passion, that she desires passion, and wants to receive that, and that there are aspects of her identity as a human being that exist outside of being a mother. And I thought that was a really critical component to what filled in and fleshed out this short novel. Is that we each have so many aspects to our identity, and we can't be pigeonholed, just as this narrator cannot be. The book really, though, is dark and harrowing. I wouldn't recommend reading this if you're a new parent or an expecting parent, because it really does hit at a lot of those emotions that that new parents, particularly new mothers, can encounter. I was discussing aspects of it with my wife, and there were parts of it that definitely hit home. That those feelings of depression, those feelings of feeling that things are out of control, especially the things that the character, a person most wants to be in control. And so, as an example of that, let's see. My mother-in-law watched me all day long, worrying. She didn't know what else to do when she knocked on my door at dawn and entered timidly with another glass of water and a green and white pill. Thanks, I said, and as soon as she left, I tossed it into the fire. I don't like side effects. I don't like antidepressant. The only thing I could do at times like this was hug my womb and wait. The baby was asleep in there, wrapped up in my guts, foreign to me. He wasn't much help back then either. As soon as the ritual of the raised glasses and well-wishing was over, I tried to escape my husband's gaze. He was already throwing darts at the bullseye on the terrace. Every time he missed a shot, he'd say, "Arr!" I walked through the living room, which was strewn with wrapping paper, ribbons, and other decorations, to the pile of clothes for the unborn child. But I didn't put anything away. Instead, I went out into the woods, exhausted from the contractions. When I think back now, the pain returns, leaping onto me like a dog. The questions asked that Christmas perforated me with more force than hunter's bullets. Have you been looking for work? Do you think you'll send the kid to a nursery? Are you paying your taxes and your health insurance? Do you need any help? I'm finally here. I only ever come down to the woods at night when it's an emergency. And that this entire book feels like an emergency. The way it's structured gives that fractured sense of time that the narrator has. We don't really have chapters, we have episodes, because I think there's to a certain extent, Harwicz wants to present us with a character who doesn't necessarily get to live full days. She has these moments where she feels like she's in control, or in enough control to observe what's happening and to reflect on it. And those are the moments we get. And everything else throughout the day recedes into this like dark forest of the nightmare that she's living. And so it really is a harrowing book. There's violence throughout it, not necessarily violence in terms of like sexual assault, but violence around thinking around violence and ways in which that almost acts as a way to try and break through the claustrophobia that the narrator has. Because what Harwicz is has recognized and is showing us is that the greatest psychological horror is the horror of our minds, is the claustrophobia of our mind, of feeling trapped, not just in our lives, but in our minds. Because when we're trapped in our minds, there's no place to hide. We can sort of hide from life, but we can't hide from ourselves. We can't hide from our minds. The very first sentence compares a ray of sun landing, through the shaded leaves of a tree on her palm, like being the blade of a knife on the palm, and that's where it starts, and it never really lets up from there. It is an absolutely brutal book to read, and yet its authenticity is one that I appreciated. And it's definitely a book that I want to encourage other people to read. And I think encourage people to read in order to get a window into a life that is not our own. Especially for me. Like I was a new parent, but I didn't give birth. And I didn't encounter what my wife did. And so reading this book allowed me another person's voice into what that experience might feel like. I just really appreciated being able to read this. So there were, of course, many books that it brought to mind. First and foremost was the Vindication of the Rights of Woman by Mary Wollstonecraft, where Wollstonecraft writes, "I lament that women are systematically degraded by receiving the trivial attentions which men think it manly to pay to their sex, when in fact they are insultingly supporting their own superiority. It is not condescension to bow to an inferior. So ludicrous in fact do these ceremonies appear to me, that I scarcely am able to govern my muscles when I see a man start with eager and serious solicitude to lift a handkerchief or shut a door, when the lady could have done it herself, had she only moved a pace or two." And that feeling, that demand for life, is present in Wollstonecraft, and it's certainly present in Harwicz. I was reminded to a certain extent of Ibsen's Hedda Gabler. The books, the book and the play are different, and the characters are different, but not least because of, I think, the wealth that Hedda Gabler possesses. But that question of a woman's identity as a mother and a woman's identity as a human are, I think, critical to both works. There are aspects of the novel that reminded me of some of the darker moments in Anne Sexton's poetry. There were aspects of, sort of questioning human relationships that reminded me of the stories in Baboon by Nayamari Ait, which I read back in August. And there were moments in the real, deeper depression that reminded me of Last Words from Montmartre by Chiu Miao-jin, which I also had read back in August. And I was thinking of certain books that I think Die My Love updates and enhances what these books are often praised for doing. First would be Revolutionary Road by Richard Yates, and sort of its critique of the dream of the 1950s, suburban middle-class couple, and the dream of, the parents and their relationship, and their relationship, to their first child and potentially a second child. And so it felt, Die My Love felt like it was understanding those ideas, and then I think advancing them to a large degree. But it also felt like a book that understands on a much more acute level what that experience is like than Madame Bovary by Gustave Flaubert. There were aspects in terms of that trapped sense that reminded me of Tar Baby from Toni Morrison. And then there were ways in which Harwicz specifically references Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf. And I wasn't reminded so much of Mrs. Dalloway, in large part because Mrs. Dalloway jumps from voice to voice throughout the book in a very fluid way. Harwicz does that, but she wants to jar you when she does it. It's not this fluid stream. It's very clearly like you've gone down a waterfall and you're somewhere else now. But Die My Love really, for the most part, is focused on just that narrator's voice. But there are aspects of it that remind me of Virginia Woolf's letters, of seeing a mind that we know and can recognize as utterly brilliant, wrestling with itself, wrestling with doubt. And that was really what I was reminded of in Die My Love. So it's a book that I highly encourage people to read, but I would caution new or expecting parents to wait, because it hits home on a number of levels. So again, I hope everybody's well, and I look forward to reading the second book from Harwicz, Feeble Minded, I believe. So I'll be looking forward to that. Thanks everybody though. Bye.